An emotional story of redemption, love, passion, and new beginnings. To save her father's life, she sacrificed her dignity, agreeing to be the wife of convenience for a cold millionaire, haunted by a past of abandonment. What began as a loveless contract exploded into a public scandal that unearthed buried secrets and forced them both to confront the true face of love and betrayal. Watch this story until the end. You'll be surprised by what happens. If you love stories of love and romance, subscribe to this channel and leave your comments. We post videos like this every day. Now let's continue. The melancholic sound of the piano echoed through the small apartment as Isadora Coleman played the same sonata for the 10th time that morning. Her delicate hands glided over the keys with the precision of someone who had dedicated their entire life to music, but today, not even Chopin could soothe the tempest in her chest. The white envelope on the kitchen table seemed to burn her eyes with every furtive glance. Another hospital bill, another debt piling up, like an insurmountable mountain. At 24, Isadora had built her life around two pillars: music and family. The only daughter of a retired professor, she had grown up amidst sheet music and dreams of one day becoming a recognized pianist. Her father, Joseph Coleman, had always been her greatest supporter, working tirelessly to afford her private lessons and music college. But 3 months ago, a sudden stroke had changed everything. Now he lay in a hospital bed, dependent on intensive care that cost a fortune they simply didn't possess. Isadora closed the piano and walked to the window of her modest apartment in a quiet, historic district. Below, life continued its normal course, but for her, each day was a desperate fight against time and circumstances. She had sold everything she could: her jewelry, her books, even the old piano that had belonged to her grandmother. The instrument she played now was borrowed from a college friend, a constant reminder of how her life had crumbled. The doorbell rang, interrupting her somber thoughts. Isadora hurried to open it, expecting to find the neighbor who sometimes brought over a home-cooked meal. Instead, she was met by an impeccably dressed man in an Armani suit and Italian shoes that probably cost more than her annual rent. Across the city, Arthur Thorne signed another multi-million-dollar contract in his office on the top floor of a skyscraper in the downtown financial district. At 38, he had built a real estate empire that sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned tycoons. His hands, which had never known manual labor, moved with surgical precision over the documents, each signature representing millions in transactions. Arthur was a man who didn't believe in coincidences, destiny, or any form of sentimentality. At 12, he had learned in the cruelest way that love was a dangerous illusion. His mother, whom he adored, had abandoned the family for another man, leaving him with a bitter father and a younger brother who had grown up competing for scraps of affection. Since then, Arthur had transformed his heart into a fortress of ice, using money and power as his only reliable weapons. But now, even all his fortune was under threat. His father's will, discovered after his recent death, contained a clause Arthur could never have imagined: to assume full control of the family inheritance, including the company he himself had expanded. Arthur had to be married within 6 months. Otherwise, everything would pass to his brother Marcus, a man Arthur knew was incapable of maintaining the empire built with so much sacrifice. "Mr. Thorne," his secretary's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "The private investigator is here with the report you requested." Arthur nodded, adjusting his silk tie. He had hired the best detective in the city to find the perfect candidate for his wife of convenience. He needed someone desperate enough to accept the agreement, but discreet enough not to cause problems. Someone who understood that it was purely a business arrangement. The investigator entered carrying a discreet folder. "I found 3 candidates who fit your criteria, sir. All are in desperate financial situations, are well educated, and have no romantic ties that could complicate the agreement. Arthur leafed through the dossiers with the same cold interest he devoted to any other business. He stopped at the third photo, a young woman with dark eyes and a melancholic expression, brown hair tied in a simple bun. Isadora Coleman, 24, music student, daughter of a retired professor hospitalized in critical condition. This one, Arthur said, tapping his finger on the photo. She has the right appearance for social events, and her family situation will ensure her discretion. Prepare for the first contact. 2 hours later, Isadora opened her apartment, took her to a man who would change her life forever. Arthur Thorne stood there, imposing and intimidating, his cold blue eyes seeming to assess every detail of the modest home. "Miss Coleman," his voice was deep and controlled, "I need to speak with you about a proposal that might solve all your financial problems." Isadora felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something about that man that made her certain that whatever his proposal, her life would never be the same. Isadora instinctively recoiled, her fingers tightening around the doorknob. The man before her emanated an aura of power that made her feel small and vulnerable. Arthur Thorne, she'd recognized the name the moment he introduced himself, was a legend in business circles, a magnate whose face graced the covers of business magazines. "I don't understand," she murmured, her voice trembling. "How do you know about my situation?" Arthur entered uninvited, his eyes sweeping the room with the coldness of an appraiser. The apartment was clean, but clearly marked by poverty, old furniture, walls that needed a fresh coat of paint, and that borrowed piano occupying almost half of the tiny living room. "Miss Coleman, I make it a point to know all the details before I conduct any business," he said, adjusting his shirt cuffs. "I know your father has been hospitalized for 3 months, that the hospital bills have already exceeded $200,000, and you have exactly 15 days before the hospital suspends treatment." The words hit Isadora like a physical blow. She felt her legs weaken and leaned against the wall, her eyes filling with tears she fought to hold back. "What do you want from me?" asked, her voice barely a whisper. Arthur took an envelope from the inside pocket of his suit jacket, placing it on the kitchen table beside the overdue bills. "I need a wife, temporary, 1 year at most. In exchange, I'll settle all your father's debts, ensure he receives the best medical treatment available, and pay you $500,000. Isadora blinked several times, as if she hadn't heard correctly. "A wife? But I don't understand. Why me?" "Because you're perfect for what I need," Arthur replied with the same coldness he'd used to discuss a real estate transaction. "Educated, discreet, with no romantic entanglements that could complicate the agreement, and most importantly, desperate enough to accept." The brutality of the words made Isadora recoil further. "Desperate," she repeated, a mix of anger and humiliation tinting her voice. "Is that how you see me?" For the first time, Arthur seemed to falter. There was something in the way she said those words, a wounded dignity that bothered him in a way he couldn't explain. His eyes lingered on her face, fair skin, marked by worry, trembling lips, but her chin held high in a gesture of pride that contrasted with her desperate situation. "It's not about how I see you," he said, forcing his voice to remain neutral. "It's a business arrangement. You help me solve a legal problem, I solve your financial problems. Simple as that." Isadora walked to the window, hugging herself. Outside, it began to rain, the drops sliding down the glass like the tears she wouldn't allow to fall. "What kind of legal problem requires a marriage?" "That's none of your concern," Arthur replied dryly. You just need to know it will be a marriage of convenience, a few public appearances, some social dinners. Nothing more than that." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of the rain. Isadora could feel the weight of his gaze on her back, a strange sensation that made her aware of every movement. When she finally turned, she found Arthur watching her with an intensity that made her blush. "I need to think," she said, her voice firmer now. "You have until tomorrow," Arthur replied, walking towards the door. "My driver will pick you up at 9 in the morning. If you're interested, get in the car. If not, he'll drive away." Isadora followed him to the door, a question burning on her lips. "Why me, really? This city is full of women who would accept a proposal like this." Arthur stopped, his hand on the doorknob. For a moment, Isadora thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally turned, there was something different in his eyes, a shadow of vulnerability that vanished so quickly she almost thought she'd imagined it. "Because you're the only one who doesn't look at me as if I'm a prize to be won," he said, surprising both of them with the honesty of the answer. After he left, Isadora stood at the door for long minutes, the envelope still untouched on the table. Her rational mind told her it was madness, that marrying a stranger, even temporarily, was too dangerous. But the image of her father in the hospital bed, growing more fragile each day, made her consider the unthinkable. That night, she couldn't sleep. With each passing hour, she remembered something about Arthur Thorne she couldn't get out of her head. The way he had observed her apartment, not with disdain, but with something that seemed almost curiosity. The way his voice had softened when she mentioned being desperate. And especially that moment at the door when he dropped his guard for a fraction of a second. The next morning, promptly at 9, a black Mercedes pulled up in front of the building. Isadora watched from the window for 5 minutes, her heart pounding. Inside the car, she knew Arthur Thorne would be waiting for an answer that would change the course of both their lives. With trembling hands, she grabbed her purse and descended the stairs, unaware that this would be the first step towards a destiny neither of them could have foreseen. The county clerk's office was cold and impersonal, exactly as Arthur had planned. Isadora stood beside him, wearing a simple navy blue dress, the only one she owned that could be considered appropriate for a wedding, even if it was just for show. Her hands trembled slightly as she signed the documents, and Arthur noticed. She avoided looking directly at him. "Congratulations to the newlyweds," said the registrar with a perfunctory smile, handing over the marriage certificate. "We wish you a long and happy life together." Isadora swallowed hard. The irony of the situation was almost unbearable. Here she was, at 24, marrying a man she barely knew, in a ceremony that lasted less than 15 minutes. When she imagined her wedding, she had always dreamed of a small celebration surrounded by friends and family, with flowers and music, not a business deal sealed in an austere government office. "Let's go," Arthur said, gently touching her elbow. "We need to go to the hospital, part of the agreement." During the silent drive to the hospital, Isadora watched Arthur out of the corner of her eye. He seemed completely impassive, as if he had just signed any other contract, but she noticed his fingers tapping nervously on the car's leather upholstery, a small crack in his armor of indifference. At the hospital, Arthur was surprised by the transformation that came over Isadora. The moment she entered her father's room, her posture changed completely. She became lighter, warmer, delicately kissing the forehead of the unconscious man in the bed. "Dad, I want you to meet someone," she said, with a naturalness that impressed. "Arthur, this is Arthur, my husband." Arthur approached the bed, observing the frail man who breathed with difficulty. Joseph Coleman couldn't have been more than 55, but the illness had aged him prematurely. There was something touching in the way Isadora arranged his hair, adjusted the blanket, spoke to him as if he could hear her. "He was a great teacher," she said, noticing Arthur's attentive gaze. "He taught English literature in public schools for over 20 years. He always said that education was the only thing no one could take from you." Arthur felt a strange pang in his chest. "And your mother?" "She died when I was 15. Cancer." Isadora caressed her father's inert hand. "Since then, it's just been the two of us. He worked 2 jobs to pay for my piano lessons so I could study music. He never complained, never said it was difficult. The silence in the room was filled only by the soft beeps of the monitors." Arthur watched Isadora sing a soft melody under her breath, and something in his chest tightened. There was so much love in that simple gesture, so much genuine devotion. It was something he had never experienced, not even as a child. "You sing well," he said, surprised he had spoken. Isadora smiled for the first time since they had met. "He always asked me to sing that song. It was my mother's favorite." When they left the hospital, Arthur was quieter than usual. Isadora noticed he seemed lost in thought, an almost melancholic expression on his usually impenetrable face. "May I ask something?" she said, breaking the silence in the car. "You may ask. I don't promise I'll answer. Why have you never married before? I mean, for real." Arthur took so long to answer that Isadora thought he wouldn't. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, almost vulnerable. "Because I learned early that people always leave," he said, looking out the window. "No matter how much you love them, no matter how much you need them, in the end they always find something better." Isadora felt a shiver run down her spine. There was a deep pain in those words, an old wound that still bled. "Someone hurt you deeply, didn't they?" Arthur turned to her, his blue eyes meeting hers. For a moment, Isadora saw beyond the cold facade, saw a wounded boy who had built walls around his heart. "My mother," he said simply. "She abandoned me when I was 12, said she loved me, promised she'd come back. I never saw her again." The confession hung in the air between them like a fragile bridge. Isadora felt an inexplicable urge to touch his hand, to offer some comfort. But Arthur was already composing himself, the mask of indifference settling back into place. "We're here," he said, indicating the imposing residential building in a prestigious downtown district. "Your new home." The apartment was stunning. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture. But to Isadora, it felt cold and impersonal. Like a furniture showroom. "Your room is there," Arthur indicated a hallway. "I'll be on the other side of the apartment. We have separate spaces, as agreed." Isadora nodded, walking to the room that would be hers for the next few months. It was larger than her entire old apartment, with a walk-in closet and a view of the city. But when she sat on the luxurious bed, she felt more alone than ever. Later, when Arthur passed through the kitchen for water, he found Isadora seated at the grand piano that dominated the living room. She was playing the same melody she had sung at the hospital, but now there was a deep sadness in the music. "You didn't say you knew how to play," she said without stopping. "I don't," Arthur replied, but approached the piano. "Your hands say otherwise?" Isadora smiled sadly. "You have calluses on your fingers, small, old, but still visible." Arthur looked at his own hands, surprised. "I played when I was a child. I stopped after my mother left." "She taught you?" "No, I taught myself. It was the only thing that made me feel less alone." Isadora stopped playing and looked at him. "You don't have to pretend with me, Arthur. Not when we're alone." For a moment, Arthur seemed to consider her words. Then, slowly, he sat beside her on the piano bench. His hands hovered over the keys, hesitant, as if afraid to awaken old memories. "I don't remember anymore," he said, but his fingers moved instinctively, playing a simple, melancholic melody. Isadora recognized the music, an old, comforting lullaby. There was something deeply touching in seeing that powerful man playing a melody so vulnerable, so full of longing. "Your mother used to sing that?" she asked softly. Arthur stopped, abruptly rising from the bench as if he had been burned. "Good night, Isadora." He walked away quickly, leaving her alone with the piano and the certainty that she had just glimpsed the broken heart of a man who had spent his entire life pretending he didn't have one. The couple's first public appearance was scheduled for a charity gala at one of the city's most prestigious hotels. Arthur had chosen the event carefully. It would be the official introduction of his wife to the city's elite, a crucial test to validate their marriage before the speculative eyes that watched him. Isadora was nervous, adjusting for the 10th time the black dress Arthur had sent over. It was elegant, but she felt like an imposter wearing something that cost more than a year's rent of her old apartment. When Arthur appeared in the room, impeccable in his tuxedo, she felt her heart race in a way she couldn't explain. "You look beautiful," he said, and for the first time seemed genuinely surprised by his own words. "Thank you," she murmured, blushing. "You look very good too." The hotel buzzed with elegant people, low conversations, and the clinking of champagne flutes. Isadora felt as if she were in a movie, walking arm in arm with Arthur through the gilded ballroom. He introduced her with rehearsed naturalness, his hand always respectful on her back, but she could feel the tension in his muscles. "Arthur Thorne," a male voice cut through the buzz. "What a surprise to see you here." Isadora felt Arthur stiffen beside her. The man approaching was younger, with similar features but a much crueler expression. She didn't need introductions to know she was standing before Marcus Thorne, Arthur's brother. "Marcus," Arthur replied with controlled coolness. "I didn't know you frequented cultural events." "Oh, you know how it is. I always like to observe." Marcus smiled, but his eyes were predatory. "And you must be the famous wife, Isadora, isn't it?" "Nice to meet you." Isadora extended her hand, trying to maintain her composure. "The pleasure is all mine." Marcus kissed her hand, lingering longer than necessary. "I must say my brother has good taste, though I'm surprised he married so discreetly." "We prefer intimacy," Arthur interrupted, pulling Isadora closer. "If you'll excuse us." Of course, but I hope we can get to know each other better soon, sister-in-law." Marcus walked away with a sinister smile. "He knows," Isadora murmured when they were alone. "He suspects." But he suspected from day one. Arthur guided her to the dance floor. "We need to look convincing." When Arthur pulled her into his arms, Isadora felt an electric current run through her body. He danced with the same controlled precision with which he did everything. But there was something different in the way he looked at her, as if he were seeing her for the first time. "You're tense," he observed, his voice low near her ear. "I'm trying not to step on your feet," she lied, trying to ignore the warmth spreading through her body. Arthur smiled, a real smile, not the polished expression he used in public. "You dance very well. Where did you learn?" "My father. He used to say a lady needed to know how to dance." Isadora allowed herself to relax slightly. "And you, let me guess, private lessons?" "My mother," he said, immediately regretting the confession. Before she left," Isadora completed, softly. They danced in silence for a few minutes, lost in each other's gaze. The ballroom around them seemed to have disappeared, voices becoming a distant murmur. Isadora could feel Arthur's masculine scent, the firmness of his hand on her back, the way their bodies fit together perfectly. "Isadora," Arthur murmured, his voice rougher. But the words were interrupted by a deafening crash. The lights flickered and died, plunging the ballroom into darkness. Screams echoed through the room, followed by the sound of breaking glass and hurried footsteps. "What was that?" Isadora clutched Arthur's arm. "I don't know. Stay close to me." Arthur pulled her against his chest, protecting her instinctively. In the ensuing confusion, with the emergency lights casting ghostly shadows, Isadora stumbled. Arthur caught her, but the movement sent them tumbling together behind one of the tables. Pressed into the small space, with chaos continuing around them, they found themselves face to face, breaths intertwined. "Are you hurt?" Arthur asked, his hands delicately tracing her face, searching for injuries. "No," she whispered, but didn't pull away. "Arthur, This time, nothing interrupted them. Arthur kissed her with an intensity that surprised both, as if all the walls he had built around himself had crumbled at once. Isadora responded with equal fervor, her hands losing themselves. In his hair, forgetting where they were, why they were there. When they finally separated, breathless, reality hit them like a cold splash of water. The lights had come back on, revealing that the accident had been nothing more than a temporary power outage. But what had happened between them was too real to be ignored. "This can't happen again," Arthur said, pulling away and helping her. "Up." "I know," Isadora replied, but her eyes said otherwise. What neither of them noticed was Marcus Thorne on the other side of the ballroom, a cruel smile on his lips and his phone in hand. He had managed to capture a photo of them in their most intimate moment, proof that there was something more than a simple business arrangement between the two. On the way home, the silence in the car was thick with tension. Isadora could feel Arthur battling something within himself, his hands clenched on the steering wheel. "What happened back there means nothing," he said finally. "Of course not," she agreed, but her words sounded false even to herself. When they arrived at the apartment, Arthur went straight to his room, but Isadora followed him. "Arthur, wait." He stopped, but didn't turn around. "Isadora, don't make this harder than it already is." "Harder?" She touched his shoulder, making him turn. "What's hard? Admitting you felt something too?" "I don't feel anything," he said, but his voice betrayed the lie. "Liar," she whispered, stepping closer. "You felt the same way I did. And that scares you." Arthur looked at her with a tortured expression. "You don't understand. I can't allow myself to feel this." "Why?" "Because I destroy everything I touch, because everyone I've loved has abandoned me, because you deserve something better than a man who doesn't know how to love." The vulnerability in his voice broke Isadora's heart. She moved closer, placing her hand on his face. "What if I don't want something better? What if I want you exactly as you are?" For a moment, Arthur seemed to surrender. His eyes closed, and he leaned his face into her hand. But then, abruptly, he pulled away. "Good night, Isadora." He closed the door, leaving her alone in the hallway. But both knew that something had irrevocably changed between them. And on the other side of the city, Marcus Thorne studied the photo on his phone, planning how to use that information to destroy his brother once and for all. The days following the kiss were a silent torture for both. Arthur left early and returned late, avoiding any contact that wasn't strictly necessary. Isadora, for her part, spent her mornings at the hospital with her father and her afternoons lost in thought, playing the piano with an intensity that betrayed her inner turmoil. But reality wouldn't allow them to escape forever. On Thursday, Arthur received a phone call that would change everything. "Mr. Thorne," said Helena, his secretary, with clear nervousness in her voice. "Your lawyer is here." He says it's urgent. Dr. Henry Evans was a stern man of 60 who had been the Thorne family lawyer for decades. When he entered Arthur's office, his grave expression indicated trouble. "Arthur, we received a notification today. Your brother is contesting the validity of your marriage." Arthur felt his blood run cold. "On what grounds?" "He claims the marriage is a sham, a business arrangement created specifically to circumvent the clauses of your father's will. He has evidence." The lawyer placed a folder on the table. Arthur opened it and found photos of him and Isadora from the gala night. But not the kiss. They were earlier images showing the physical distance between them, the formality of their interactions, the lack of natural intimacy of a couple in love. "This proves nothing," Arthur said, but his voice didn't sound convincing. "There's more." Dr. Evans continued reluctantly. "He hired a private investigator. They know about the separate apartment, about the fact that you don't sleep in the same room, about Isadora's background, about her debts." Arthur stood abruptly, walking to the window. "How much time do we have?" 3 weeks. If we can't prove the marriage is genuine, you lose everything. The company, the inheritance, everything will pass to Marcus." That night, Arthur came home with the weight of the world on his shoulders. He found Isadora in the kitchen, preparing a simple dinner, a habit she had acquired in recent days, trying to bring some warmth to that cold home. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. Isadora turned, immediately noticing the tension on his face. "What happened?" Arthur told her everything, about the contestation, about the evidence, about the approaching deadline. Isadora listened in silence, her expression growing paler and paler. "So that's it," she said finally. "Your brother found out." "Not completely, but he suspects enough to cause problems." Arthur ran a hand through his hair. "We'll have to be more convincing." "Convincing how?" "More frequent public appearances, displays of affection. Perhaps it's better if you move into my room." Isadora felt her heart race. "Arthur, I don't know if—" "Nothing has to happen between us," he said quickly, avoiding her gaze. "Just to maintain appearances, for anyone who might be watching us." But they both knew that sharing the same space, especially after what had happened at the gala, would be playing with fire. The next morning, Isadora moved her few belongings into Arthur's bedroom. The space was elegant and masculine, dominated by a king-size bed and a spectacular view of the city. Arthur had insisted she take the bed while he slept on the couch, but the proximity was still disconcerting. "There are rules," he said, as she arranged her clothes in the closet next to his. "We don't enter the bathroom when the other is using it. We don't talk about what happened at the gala, and we keep our hands off each other." "Understood," Isadora replied, but her voice sounded strange even to herself. The first night was a disaster. Isadora lay awake, listening to Arthur toss and turn restlessly on the couch, occasionally muttering in his sleep. When she finally drifted off, she was woken by a muffled cry. Arthur was sitting on the couch, sweating and trembling. She approached instinctively, forgetting the rules he had set. "Hey, are you okay?" "Nightmare," he said, avoiding looking at her. "Sorry if I woke you." "About what?" Arthur hesitated. "About my mother, always about my mother." Isadora sat beside him on the couch, maintaining a respectful distance. "Do you want to talk about it?" "There's nothing to talk about. She's gone. End of story." "But it's not the end of the story, is it?" Isadora observed. "You still dream about her. You still feel—" "I still feel angry," Arthur interrupted. "Angry that she abandoned me. Angry that I believed she loved me. Angry that I was stupid enough to trust anyone." "You," were 12, Arthur, you were a child. Young enough to believe empty promises. Old enough to learn that love is a lie. Isadora felt her heart ache for him. Not all love is a lie. No. Arthur looked at her for the first time. Then tell me, Isadora, what do you feel for me? Gratitude? Obligation? Or are you faking so well that even you believe it? The question hit her like a punch. I see. Even you don't know. Arthur stood up. I'll sleep in the office. It'll be better that way. Arthur, no. Isadora grabbed his arm. Stay, please. He stopped, but didn't turn. Why? Because you shouldn't be alone when you have nightmares. Arthur finally looked at her, and Isadora saw something break in his eyes. Isadora, don't do this. Do what? Don't be kind to me. Don't give me hopes you can't fulfill. Who says I can't? The question hung in the air, between them, charged with dangerous possibilities. Arthur took a step towards her, then stopped. Do you know what will happen if we continue down this path? No, she whispered. But I also don't know what will happen if we don't continue. It was all Arthur needed to hear. In 2 steps he was beside her, his hands framing her face with a delicacy that contrasted with the intensity of his gaze. Isadora, if we do this, if we let it happen, there'll be no turning back. I'm not good at holding back. Then don't. A hold back, she murmured, moving closer to him. This time there were no crowds around, no flickering lights. It was just the two of them, in the silence of the room, crossing a line they both knew they shouldn't cross. The kiss was different. From the first, slower, deeper, charged with all the tension that had been building between them. Arthur pulled her closer, as if he wanted to memorize every sensation, every contour of her body. This is madness, he murmured against her lips. I know, she replied, but didn't pull away. They lay on the bed, just kissing and carefully exploring the limits of what was happening. Arthur was surprisingly gentle, his hands respectful, even in the intensity of the moment. When they finally fell asleep, they were in each other's arms, the abandoned couch on the other side of the room. The next morning, Isadora woke up alone. Arthur had already left, leaving only a note. Important meeting. Back tonight. She smiled, touching her lips, still sensitive from the previous night's kisses. Perhaps it was madness, but for the first time in a long while, she felt alive. What she didn't know was that, at that exact moment, Marcus Thorne was in a meeting with 3 journalists from the tabloid press, showing them photos and documents that painted a devastating picture of his brother's marriage. I have sources that confirm she was financially desperate, Marcus said with a cruel smile. My brother literally bought her, and I have proof that the marriage is a complete sham. When do you want us to publish? One of the journalists asked. Next week. I want it to be a national scandal. I want Arthur Thorne to be publicly destroyed. Dumb. And while Marcus planned Arthur's destruction, and Arthur fought in meetings to save his businesses, Isadora spent the day at the hospital, singing to her father and dreaming of the man she was learning to love, unaware that a devastating storm was about to break over their lives. The scandal exploded on a Monday morning, like a bomb that shattered Arthur and Isadora's lives into 1,000 pieces. Isadora was at the hospital, singing softly to her father, when her best friend Carla burst into the room, her face pale with shock. Isadora, you need to see this, she said, extending the tablet with trembling hands. The headline on the front page of the nation's biggest gossip site was devastating. Tycoon buys wife to circumvent will, exclusive. Photos and documents prove the sham of the year's marriage. Isadora felt the world crumble around her. There were photos of her entering the building where Arthur lived, documents about her father's debts, even records of her calls to the hospital. But the worst were the photos of them at the gala. Not the intimate kiss that had happened during the blackout, but earlier images that showed them as strangers, without any chemistry, without any true connection. According to sources close to the Thorne family, the article continued, the marriage was hastily arranged so Arthur could meet the requirements of his father's will. Isadora Coleman, a music student in desperate financial straits, reportedly received $500,000 to participate in the charade. The tablet slipped from Isadora's hands, falling to the floor and shattering. She could barely breathe, the weight of public humiliation crushing her chest like a stone. "Isa, are you okay?" Carla touched her arm, worried. "No," Isadora whispered. "I'm not okay. Nothing is okay." Across the city, Arthur discovered the scandal even more brutally. He was in a meeting with Japanese investors when Helena entered the room, her face white as a sheet. "Mr. Thorne, I need to speak with you, urgently." Arthur asked for a break in the meeting and left the conference room. Helena showed him the tablet and he felt his blood run cold. It wasn't just the online articles, the print newspapers also blazoned the story, with even more sensational headlines. "Cancel all meetings," he said, his voice controlled but deadly. "Now." "Sir, the Japanese investors—" "I said now, Helena." Arthur drove home like a man possessed. He needed to get to Isadora, he needed to explain, but what could he explain? That everything had started as a lie? That he really had bought her to solve his problems? When he arrived at the apartment, he found Isadora in the living room, standing by the window, still wearing the same clothes from the hospital. She didn't turn when he entered. "Isadora." "500,000, she said, her voice eerily calm. "Was that my price?" "It wasn't like that." "No?" She turned, and Arthur saw that she had been crying. "Then explain how it was. Explain how you didn't buy me like an object. You needed the money. And you needed a wife. What a perfect arrangement." Her voice was laden with a bitterness he had never heard before. "Tell me, Arthur, when you kissed me, when you touched me, when you made me believe that maybe there was something real between us, was that also in the contract?" "Isadora, please." "Answer me!" she screamed, and Arthur recoiled from the force of her pain. "Was all this planned? Did you know I was pathetic enough to fall for you?" "You fell for me?" The question escaped before Arthur could stop himself. Isadora laughed, but there was no joy in the sound. "What difference does it make? You bought me, Arthur. You publicly humiliated me. You turned me into a national joke. I didn't know he'd do this. I never wanted you to get hurt. But I did get hurt, and so did my father." Isadora walked to the table, picking up a copy of the newspaper. "Look at this. Daughter sells herself to pay father's debts. Do you know what this will do to him if he wakes up? Do you know what it's like to have to face the doctors, the nurses, knowing everyone has read about how their daughter prostituted herself?" "It wasn't prostitution." "It wasn't?" Isadora interrupted him. "Then tell me the difference." "I sold myself to you, my body, my dignity, my life, all for money." "Stop it," Arthur said, desperate. "You know what happened between us was real. You know You what? You love me?" Isadora laughed bitterly. "Men like you don't love, Arthur. You buy, you use, you discard. And I was stupid enough to forget that that's not true, isn't it?" Isadora stepped closer to him, her eyes blazing. "Then tell me you feel something for me. Tell me you love me. Tell me I'm more than a means to an end." Arthur opened his mouth, but the words wouldn't come. He wanted to say it, wanted to confess that she had become the most important thing. in his life, that the idea of losing her terrified him more than losing all his fortune. But years of wounds, of fear, of walls built around his heart prevented him. "I thought so," he whispered finally. "I thought maybe, but you're not." "Sure," Isadora finished, her voice breaking. "You're never sure of anything that involves feelings, are you? Because your mother hurt you, because you can't trust anyone, because you'd rather live alone than risk being abandoned again." The words struck Arthur like daggers. "Isadora, No." She raised her hand, stopping him. "I won't do this anymore. I won't beg for scraps of affection from a man who can't love anyone but himself." She walked to their bedroom, which would now be only his again, and returned with a small suitcase. "What are you doing? Letting you have what you always wanted, your solitude, your coldness, your perfect world where no one can hurt you because you don't let anyone get close." "You can't leave," Arthur said, desperate. "The contract. We still have 6 months." "Tear up the contract," Isadora replied, stopping at the door. "You already got what you wanted. Your brother has been exposed as a man capable of destroying an entire family for greed. Investors will realize what kind of person he is. You'll keep your company, your fortune, your perfect life. And you..." "I'll survive. I always have." Isadora looked at him one last time, and Arthur saw that something had died in her eyes. "Goodbye, Arthur. Thank you for teaching me that my father was wrong. Some things can be taken from you, including the capacity to believe in love." The door closed behind her with a final definitive sound. Arthur stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the luxury and coldness of his world, more alone than he had ever felt. In the days that followed, Arthur tried to focus on work, on meetings, on anything that would distract him from the growing pain in his chest. But everything reminded him of Isadora. The piano she played, the scent of her perfume that still lingered on the pillows, the deafening silence of an apartment she had for a few months, transformed into a home. Isadora, for her part, had returned to her small apartment in the quiet, historic district, which seemed even more cramped and sad after the months in the prestigious downtown district. She tried to maintain a routine. She visited her father in the hospital, practiced piano, pretended that her life hadn't completely imploded. "You still love him," observed Carla, who had become her constant companion during the toughest days. "It doesn't matter," Isadora replied, playing a sad melody. "Love isn't enough when it's unrequited." "Are you sure it's unrequited?" "I am. You saw how he reacted when I asked if he loved me. He couldn't even say the words." But what Isadora didn't know was that Arthur spent his nights awake, pacing the apartment like a ghost, remembering every word she had said, every accusation she had made. And deep in his shattered soul, he knew she was right. He had been a coward. He had let fear conquer love. 3 weeks after the scandal, Arthur received a call that would change everything. It was from the hospital. "Mr. Thorne, this is Dr. Ramirez. I need to speak with you about Joseph Coleman. He's awake." Arthur felt his heart race. Joseph was awake, and that meant he would finally know the truth about what his daughter had done for him. Arthur knew he needed to go there, needed to explain, needed to try and mend at least part of the damage he had caused. But when he arrived at the hospital, he found Isadora leaving her father's room, her eyes red from crying. "He knows," she said, without even looking at Arthur. "He knows everything. And the first thing he asked me was if I still loved you." "And what did you say?" Isadora finally looked at him, and Arthur saw she was exhausted, broken, but there was still a spark of dignity in her eyes. "I said yes, that I'm stupid enough to love a man who can't love anyone back." She walked past him without another word, leaving him alone in the hospital corridor, with the certainty that he had lost the only person who truly mattered. And for the first time in his adult life, Arthur Thorne cried. 2 weeks had passed since the encounter at the hospital, and Isadora had fallen into a bleak and mechanical routine. She woke early, visited her father, who was recovering slowly but was devastated by the guilt of having been the reason for his daughter's public humiliation, then returned home and played the piano until her hands ached. It was her only escape from the pain that consumed her within. Joseph Coleman, though weak, watched his daughter with a broken heart. He knew Isadora better than anyone in the world, and he knew that something beyond the scandal was destroying her. She had fallen desperately in love with Arthur Thorne, and that made everything even more painful. "Daughter," he said one afternoon when she arrived at the hospital with even deeper dark circles under her eyes, "you need to tell me the truth, all of it." Isadora sat beside the bed, avoiding her father's penetrating gaze. "Dad, you already know everything. The papers tell the version someone wanted told," Joseph interrupted. "But I know you. I know my daughter. And I know there's more to this story." It was then that Isadora broke down. Between sobs, she told her father everything, about the desperation that led her to accept the proposal, about how Arthur had revealed himself to be a wounded and complex man, about the moments of intimacy they had shared, about how she had fallen for him against all logic. "But he can't love me, Dad," she finished, tears streaming down her face. "He's so hurt, so haunted by the past, that he can't trust anyone, and I can't force him to feel something he doesn't feel." Joseph remained silent for a long moment, processing everything he had heard. "My daughter, are you sure he feels nothing for you?" "I am. When I asked if he loved me, he couldn't even say the words." "And have you stopped to think that maybe he was protecting you? That maybe he believed you would be better off without him?" Isadora looked at her father, surprised. "Dad, you don't understand. He bought me. He used me." "He saved our family," Joseph corrected softly. "And from what you've told me, he fell in love with you in the process. Men like Arthur Thorne don't make romantic gestures, daughter. They don't know how to express love in the traditional way, but that doesn't mean they don't feel it." While Isadora wrestled with her own emotions, Arthur was living his own personal hell. He had buried himself in work, but not even the most important meetings could distract him from the constant pain in his chest. Every part of the apartment, every corner of the city, everything reminded him of Isadora. Dr. Henry Evans had managed to reverse much of the damage caused by the scandal. Marcus, in his thirst for revenge, had exposed not only Arthur but also his own cruel and manipulative nature. Investors and business partners had been horrified by the methods he had used to try and destroy his brother, and many now saw Arthur as the victim of the situation. "You won," Dr. Evans said during a meeting. "Marcus is completely discredited. No one will want to do business with him after what he did. Your inheritance is secure." But Arthur felt no satisfaction in the victory. And Isadora? What about her? She was destroyed in the process. Her reputation, her dignity, all because of me. Dr. Evans observed Arthur with curiosity. He had known the man for years, and he had never seen him demonstrate so much remorse or genuine pain. "Arthur, may I ask you a question? Do you love this woman?" The question hit Arthur like a punch. He remained silent for a long moment, fighting the answer he already knew. "Yes," he admitted finally. "I love her, more than I thought possible." "To love anyone, then why did you let her go?" "Because she deserves something better. Because I hurt her, because..." Arthur stopped, his voice breaking. "Because I'm afraid." Afraid of what? Of her abandoning me. Like my mother did, like everyone does. Dr. Evans leaned forward. Arthur, have you ever considered that perhaps your mother didn't abandon you because she didn't love you, that perhaps there were other reasons? Arthur frowned. What do you mean? Nothing. Just an observation from an old man who has known your family for a long time. That night, Arthur couldn't sleep. The lawyer's words echoed in his mind, planting seeds of doubt about everything he believed about his past. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to remember his mother without anger, only with longing. Elena Thorne had been a gentle woman who loved music and played piano. She sang lullabies to him, taught him to play, made him feel special and loved. But after she left, Arthur had buried those memories, replacing them with anger and resentment. The next day, Arthur made a decision. He needed to discover the truth about what had happened with his mother. He needed to understand the past, to have a future. He hired the same private investigator who had found Isadora, but this time with a different mission: find Elena Thorne. Meanwhile, Isadora was at the hospital when a nurse approached her. Excuse me, miss, there's a woman here who would like to speak with you. She said her name is Elena Thorne. Isadora felt her heart race. What woman? She said her name is Elena Thorne. Isadora's world stopped. Elena Thorne, Arthur's mother. The woman who had abandoned him was there at the hospital wanting to speak with her. With trembling legs, Isadora followed the nurse to the hospital cafeteria. An elegant woman of about 50 sat at a corner table, her graying hair pulled back in a simple bun. Her blue eyes, Arthur's same eyes, filled with a profound sadness. Isadora. The woman stood up nervously. I'm Elena Thorne, Arthur's mother. Isadora sat down, still in shock. How did you find me? I never lost sight of Arthur, Elena said, her eyes filling with tears. I've been watching him from afar for years. I know about the marriage, about the scandal, about everything, and I know you love him. I don't understand, Arthur said. You abandoned him. Elena closed her eyes, the pain evident on her face. I didn't abandon him. I was forced to leave. Forced by whom? By his father. Henry Thorne discovered I had a mental illness, bipolar disorder. Back then, in the 90s, it was very misunderstood. He said I was a bad influence on the children, that I was crazy, that it would be better for everyone if I disappeared. Isadora felt a shiver run down her spine. But you could have fought. I tried, but he blackmailed me terribly. He said that if I didn't leave voluntarily, he would prove in court that I was an unfit mother and prevent me from ever seeing my children. At least by leaving, I would have the hope of returning when they were older. And why did you never return? Because the longer time passed, the more I believed they would be better off without me, that I really was a bad mother. The depression convinced me I didn't deserve their love. Isadora felt tears stream down her face. Arthur needs to know this. He would hate me even more. I abandoned him even if I was forced. I let him down when he needed me most. He wouldn't hate you. Isadora held the woman's hand. He loves you. He never stopped loving you, and that's destroying his ability to love anyone else. Elena looked at her with an expression of hope mixed with fear. Do you really believe that? I know it. He talks about you in his nightmares. He stopped playing piano because it reminded him of you. He built walls around his heart because losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to him. And now he's losing you for the same reason, Elena observed, because he's afraid of being abandoned again. Yes, Isadora admitted. But I don't know how to make him understand that I would never abandon him, that I love him exactly as he is, wounds and all. Elena remained silent for a moment, then made a decision. There's something you need to know, something that might help Arthur understand what really happened. She took a yellowed letter from her purse with delicate handwriting. I wrote this to him the day I left. It explains everything, why I left, how much I loved him, how I hoped to return. But I never had the courage to send it. Isadora took the letter with trembling hands. Why are you giving me this? Because you truly love him. Because you can save him from a life of loneliness and bitterness. Because perhaps through you, I can finally tell my son that I never stopped loving him. Isadora looked at the letter, feeling the weight of the responsibility. In her hands was the key to freeing Arthur from his tortured past, but she also knew that showing it to him would be an enormous risk. He could feel betrayed, manipulated, or worse. He might not believe her. He'll hate me for meeting you. And she said to Tom, perhaps. But he might also finally understand that true love exists, that not everyone we love abandons us. Isadora put the letter in her purse, making a decision that would change everything. She would fight for Arthur, even if it meant risking being rejected again, because some battles were worth fighting, even when the chances of victory seemed impossible. Thank you, she said to Elena, for giving me the chance to save him, to save us both. Elena smiled for the first time, and Isadora saw where Arthur had inherited that rare but devastatingly beautiful smile. Thank you for loving my son the way he deserves to be loved. Isadora left the hospital with a determination she hadn't felt in weeks. She had a plan, she had a weapon, and she finally had hope. The war for Arthur Thorne's heart was far from over. Isadora spent 3 days planning every detail. She couldn't just show up at Arthur's apartment with Elena's letter. He was too wounded, too proud to listen to explanations. She needed a different approach, something that would force him to confront not only the truth about his mother, but also about his own feelings. The opportunity arose when she learned through Carla that Arthur would be honored at a gala dinner hosted by the Metropolitan Business Association. It was a public but restricted event where he couldn't simply flee or hide behind his usual defenses. On the night of the event, Isadora dressed with the same care she would for a concert. She chose a simple but elegant red dress. Not the kind of outfit Arthur had bought for her, but something that was genuinely her own. She wanted him to see her as she really was, not as the woman he had tried to mold. The hotel ballroom was packed with executives, politicians, and socialites. Isadora felt out of place for a moment, but then she remembered the purpose of her mission. She wasn't there to impress anyone. She was there to save the man she loved from a life of solitude. Arthur was on stage receiving a plaque of recognition for his contribution to the city's real estate development. He looked impeccable in his tuxedo, but Isadora noticed the dark shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. He was suffering as much as she was. When Arthur came down from the stage, Isadora approached him. He saw her before she could speak, and his face transformed. Surprise, pain, something that might have been hope. "Isadora," he said, his voice rough. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," she replied, ignoring the curious glances of the people around them. "It's important." "There's nothing to talk about. I've already caused enough damage." "Arthur, please, 5 minutes. That's all I ask." Something in her voice, an urgency he couldn't ignore, made him agree. They stepped out onto the hotel terrace, where the night air of the city enveloped them in a forced intimacy. "I found your mother," Isadora said without preamble. Arthur recoiled as if he had been struck. "What did you say?" "Elena Thorne. She came to see me at the hospital. We talked." No. Arthur shook his head, his expression closing off. I won't listen to this. I won't let you use my mother to manipulate me. She didn't abandon you, Arthur. Isadora pulled the letter from her purse. She was forced to leave. Your father blackmailed her. You're lying. I'm not, and I can prove it. She held out the letter. She wrote this to you the day she left. It explains everything. Arthur looked at the letter as if it were a poisonous snake. I don't want it. You need it. You need to know the truth. The truth is, she left me. Arthur exploded, all his pain and rage overflowing. The truth is, she chose to leave, that she abandoned me when I needed her most. The truth is, she loved you so much that she accepted living without you to protect you, Isadora retorted with the same intensity. The truth is, she never stopped loving you, just like I never will. You don't love me, Arthur said, but his voice was breaking. You can't love me. I hurt you. I used you. You saved me. Isadora stepped closer to him, holding his face in her hands. You saved my father. You gave me a chance to know an incredible man behind all that armor. I'm not incredible. You're wounded, you're scared, you're human. Isadora forced him to look at her. And I love you exactly as you are, wounds and all. Arthur tried to pull away, but she wouldn't let him. Read the letter, Arthur. Not for me, for you. You deserve to know the truth. With trembling hands, Arthur took the letter. The paper was yellowed with time, but the ink was still legible. He immediately recognized his mother's delicate handwriting. My dearest Arthur, he read aloud, his voice faltering. If you are reading this, it's because something terrible has happened. Your father found out about my illness and gave me an ultimatum. Leave voluntarily or be declared mentally incompetent and lose you forever. Arthur stopped reading, tears beginning to stream down his face. Isadora moved closer, offering him the silent support of her presence. Keep going, she whispered. I prefer to live with the hope of one day returning than to lose you completely. I love you more than you will ever know, my son. You are my greatest joy, my greatest accomplishment. When you play the piano, remember me. When you smile, know that I am smiling too, wherever I am. Arthur couldn't continue. He doubled over, sobbing like a child. All the rage, all the pain, all the loneliness of years were released in a torrent of tears. Isadora held him in her arms, allowing him to cry against her shoulder. It's okay, she murmured. It's okay. She loved you. She always loved you. I spent my whole life hating her, Arthur sobbed. I built walls. I became cold. I pushed everyone away because I thought love meant abandonment. But it doesn't. Love means fighting. It means choosing to stay even when it's hard. Isadora pulled back slightly to look at him. I choose to stay, Arthur. I choose to love you, even if you can't love me back. But I can, he said finally. I love you. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you so much that I preferred to push you away than risk losing you. You won't lose me, Isadora promised. Never. I'm not your mother. I'm not going anywhere. You promise? I promise, but you need to let me in. You need to stop fighting against us. Arthur looked at her, truly looked, for the first time since the scandal. He saw the woman who had become his anchor, his light, his salvation, the woman who had fought for him when he couldn't fight for himself. I love you, he said, the words coming easier now. I love you and I'm scared, and I don't know how to do this right, but I want to try. I want to learn to love you the way you deserve. We'll learn together. Isadora smiled, tears streaming down her face. We have time. Arthur kissed her then, with all the passion and desperation he had been holding back. It was a kiss of promise, of surrender, of a future they would build together. When they separated, Arthur held her face in his hands. "Marry me," he said, "for real this time. Not because of wills or contracts, but because I can't live without you." "We're already married." Isadora laughed through her tears. "Then let's get married again. With your family, with my friends, with flowers and music and everything you dreamed of." Arthur smiled, the real smile she had seen so rarely. "We'll do everything right this time." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I accept. Again." 6 months later, Isadora walked down the aisle of a charming neighborhood church, wearing the wedding dress that had belonged to her mother. Arthur waited for her at the altar, flanked by Dr. Henry Evans as his best man, and to everyone's surprise, Elena Thorne in the front row. Mother and son had reunited a few weeks after the night on the terrace. It had been difficult, painful, but also healing. Elena was undergoing treatment for her depression and, slowly, rebuilding her relationship with Arthur and Marcus, who, after seeing the damage he had caused, sought professional help to deal with his own demons. Joseph Coleman, fully recovered, walked his daughter down the aisle with tears of joy in his eyes. He had reconciled with the fact that Arthur had saved his life and, more importantly, had made his daughter happy. When Isadora reached the altar, Arthur took her hand and whispered, "Thank you for saving me." "Thank you for letting me love you," she replied. The ceremony was simple but emotional. When the priest declared them husband and wife, Arthur kissed Isadora with the passion of a man who had found his home, his peace, his reason for living. At the reception held in the garden of the house they had bought together in the charming neighborhood, Arthur surprised everyone by sitting down at the piano. His hands, which had been silent for so many years, began to play the lullaby his mother used to sing. Isadora joined him, singing softly, and for the first time in decades, Arthur felt no pain as he played. He felt only love, gratitude, and the promise of a future where he would never be alone again. "I love you, Mrs. Thorne," he said when they finished playing. "I love you, husband," she replied, and sealed the promise with a kiss that spoke of happy endings, second chances, and the redemptive power of true love. Some stories begin with lies but end with the purest truth of all, that love can heal any wound, tear down any wall, and transform even the most broken hearts into works of art. Arthur and Isadora had found their song, and it would play forever.